The year is 2018, and The Walking Dead is entering an all-time low for the franchise. Both the fan base and critics alike universally panned seasons 7 and 8, which covered the all-out war adaptation of the comics. It was universally hated, and to top this off, coming into the ninth season, we were made aware that this would be Rick's last season in the show, meaning that our main character was also leaving. As someone who, at this point of reading headlines of Rick leaving the show, had seen multiple YouTube videos and articles panning the 7th and 8th seasons, and seeing an article coming out saying Rick was leaving the show, I thought to myself, well, it seems like this show is officially dying. I don't know what's going on over there, but it seems like a complete mess. And a complete mess it somewhat was. Imagine being the showrunner at this point of the series. You're coming off of two universally hated adaptations of probably the most anticipated arcs of the series. And on top of this, coming off of those two devastating blows, your main actor wants to leave the cast. I mean, how do you even begin to go forward? Well, The Walking Dead's answer to this was the Whisperers arc. And in today's video, I'm going to be analyzing and evaluating if this arc successfully revitalized the show that so desperately needed revitalization. This is The Walking Dead's Whisperers arc, or Whisperers War arc, covered in the latter half of Season 9 and the entirety of Season 10. So, your show is at an all-time low and your main character has open-endedly been kicked off the show. What do you do now? TWD's answer was drastic, a ballsy move, but overall, in my opinion, completely necessary, and that was a 6-year time jump. Instead of continuing to drag on the post-war arc with Rick, the Bridge, Sanctuary, and the other communities trying to come together after Rick's departure, it instead decides to leap 6 years into the future, where things have changed a lot. Time skips in fiction have been used all throughout media, whether it be anime, comic books, or TV shows like The Walking Dead. It can be a fresh new start for a series that seemed to have dragged on its environment for far too long and doesn't know how to naturally develop it from that time going forward. And that's exactly what The Walking Dead does. It completely revitalizes its environment and characters, changing them, and mostly for the better. A time skip as drastic as a 6-year jump immediately invests us into what has happened to the rest of the group. How have they changed? Where are they at? And how have their relationships developed or altered? Are there any new characters? And how has the world changed in this post-apocalypse? The world of The Walking Dead has changed a lot in 6 years, and that's reflected in the communities that we see our characters living in. Gone are the days of Alexandria simply being an old world community being held up by a wall. It now has thriving farmland, windmills, and many other innovations of technology given to them by the handbook that they received in Season 8. As the time skip has passed, bullets and guns seem to have scarced out. Now most characters carry a bow and arrow or a melee weapon, as it seems that these things are few and far between to come across, and rare quality weapons. Not only has the world drastically changed, but our characters and their relationships have too, as well as new ones popping up to join the gang. So let's go over that. The time skip opens with 5 new characters: Magna, Connie, Kelly, Yumiko, and Luke. A new group that are saved by Judith, who I will also count as a new character, given that our only exposure to her throughout the series has been as a baby, and I don't even think she has had any lines up to this point. Just to quickly run over the new group, Magna is annoying, Luke is mostly annoying, Yumiko is sometimes annoying, but sometimes cool, I guess, and she's British, and easily the 2 best introduced characters are Connie and Kelly, but I'll touch on them a little bit later. We see Judith rocking Carl's hat and a miniature Michonne katana and Rick's revolver, and this is the first time we see Judith as really her own character, as she's just been a baby the entire rest of the series. After this time skip, she's introduced, and I gotta say, she's probably the least annoying child actor in The Walking Dead. They handle her perfectly. She's not that vital to the story, so I probably won't mention her that much, but she's probably the least annoying kid on The Walking Dead. She's pretty badass, too, and they don't ham it up too much with, children. Sometimes with children in the show, they'll just make them really annoying or make them overly tropey, but she hits that perfect balance where you actually enjoy seeing her on screen, and I'm glad they were able to give her that adaptation to her character. My only complaint is that she kind of reeks of being a Mary Sue, even though she is interesting to watch on screen. I mean, she literally has the design of a fan fiction Walking Dead character, with the cowboy hat and the katana and Rick's revolver. That would be my only complaint about Judith. Okay, so we got Yumiko's group and Judith out of the way, but what about the characters we know? For me, I was really unsure how they were going to handle the other characters with Rick's absence. He was the main focus of the show, the main focus as a character, and he really made the show and was my favorite character. How could they have the other characters step up to the plate and fill the massive hole that was left when he left the show? Luckily for The Walking Dead, Rick leaving the show was a blessing in disguise for its other characters. Instead of the show being forced to focus on Rick as the main character, with a bunch of side characters that have been underdeveloped or have not used their potential, we now have a whole cast of characters that can now fully blossom now that the focus has gone off of Rick and can now develop the rest of the cast. I mean, just look at how the characters besides Rick were handled in seasons 7 and 8. Daryl was barely a character and literally didn't talk. Michonne was basically Rick's babysitter, and Carol had grown tiresome with her plot armor many seasons ago. These are all cool characters, but in seasons 7 through 8, and even the rest of the show, they had been massively underutilized as actual characters. Even though Daryl is cool, he has a motorcycle and a crossbow. Michonne is cool, she has a katana. And Carol is cool because she has plot armor. They weren't characters. They were just cool concepts with very little character. But now that they can now be part of the main focus of the show, these three characters in particular really step up to the plate in filling the gap that Rick left. Michonne is at the best she's ever been in the entire series. Better than season 3, 4, 5, any of that. She has grown into a leadership type role, and she has become a character that we actually want to follow as a main focus of the show, instead of an underutilized side character with a cool katana. Daryl as a character has been an issue since season 4. His entire character was just being badass. Oh, look, the governor's attacking, and I'm gonna blow up a tank with a grenade. Oh, look, I have a motorcycle. Oh, look, I have a crossbow. With very little dialogue to fill in the gaps. Luckily, in the Whisperer arc, he really steps up to the plate, and the writers also step up to the plate in terms of giving him an actual character that we can attach that badassery to. He actually has relationships with characters again, with Carol, Connie, Lydia, Henry. He actually struggles during fights. He isn't a one-trick pony that every time he's in a fight, it's just meant to look badass. He actually struggles in encounters with the Whisperers. And the show also introduces new dynamics to his character that we weren't aware of before that I will touch on a bit later. Once universally hated characters just a season ago, like Gabriel and Eugene, have really also stepped up to the plate. Gabriel filling a leadership type role, and Eugene really pulling his weight with the group, really the mastermind behind a lot of the progress they've made as a society. Rosita is Rosita. She's a frustrating character, and that doesn't change in this arc. Enid has essentially gotten out of the way, filling her role as a medical doctor, and we barely see her, and for the sake of the viewers, that's probably a good thing. Maggie is absent for the entire arc outside of the end, which I will touch on later, which leaves Jesus to fill in the leadership role in Hilltop. I really wish they did more with this, but Jesus is basically still Jesus. He doesn't want to be a leader, and he's slacking off to go do Aikido or whatever the fuck with Aaron and teaching people martial arts. He's still a cool character, but his actual character wasn't really explored more in this arc, which I wish they did more of, especially since he was forced to fill in the leadership type role that Maggie left absent. Speaking of Aaron, his character is still, unfortunately, kind of bland. Although he is likable to see on screen because he's such a good Samaritan type of character, and we've seen that the apocalypse and everything that the group's been through has really hardened him. Just look at him physically in this arc. He has a big bushy beard like Rick in season 5, and he has a mace for an arm because of his lost arm. He definitely has a cool design, and he still is a likable character, but in terms of being fleshed out, there isn't much to be seen there. And then we have Carol and Ezekiel living out their happy marriage in the kingdom with their son, Henry, that person who stabbed that one savior in the neck in season 8. Well, he's a full-grown teenager now, full of annoying teenage character problems, and that is where our main conflict starts. To start out the Whisperers arc, we have two main conflicts, both of them originating from the kingdom. We have conflict A, bringing the communities back together and saving the kingdom. See, the kingdom isn't doing too hot right now in terms of its resources, and bringing the communities back together and having allies would really help it out. Unfortunately, because of the whole Scars bullshit episode thing, Michonne and Alexandria isn't really likely to do that, and while Hilltop is more receptive to the kingdom's pleas, Alexandria kind of set an example of every community for itself, so they aren't that helpful either. So, conflict A, the communities are divided because of a terrible episode called Scars, and Ezekiel wants to bring the community back together to not only strengthen them as communities, but also save his kingdom. And our second conflict with the Whisperers, soon to be our main conflict, begins with two teenagers' arrivals at Hilltop. See, the first one is Henry. He has a sudden interest in blacksmithing, and Carol brings him to Hilltop to learn. And the second starts out the Whisperers arc. We are introduced to the Whisperers when Eugene and Rosita are out on a run. They are quickly overrun by walkers, and while hiding, they overhear walkers whispering to each other actual English words. Obviously, they are baffled at the concept of walkers beginning to speak, and even Eugene starts to hypothesize that perhaps their brain is starting to evolve and they're beginning to learn words. A group of Daryl, Jesus, Aaron, and some others go out to look for Eugene when Rosita returns, saying that she and Eugene got split up and he is still out there. Along the way, looking for Eugene, they come across hordes of walkers that are very, very uncharacteristic of the walkers we've grown accustomed to. While Daryl tries to distract them with loud popping noises and fireworks to get them off the track, they seemingly seem interested for a second and then veer off. When they find Eugene, Eugene tells them that even despite hiding, they would turn around and rerun areas that they've already looked for, a way more effective strategy than just randomly roaming towards wherever they're roaming. As a seemingly new threat, this immediately piques my interest as a viewer for a couple of reasons. For one, for many years now, there have been many complaints from viewers, fans, and critics alike that the threat of the zombies has been largely diminished since the earlier seasons. And I mean, can you really blame them for saying that? For the past 2 seasons, the zombies were basically on the side with Popcorn watching Negan and Rick's group go to war. As a viewer, evolving the threat of the walkers is massively interesting to me as a viewer. We have essentially spent the last 9 seasons outsmarting and destroying these dumb, undurable, very dim-witted zombies. And now the threat is developing to where our old tricks would necessarily work against them. That's a scary threat. What could possibly be behind this? It immediately piques my interest as a viewer. Now, finding out that a group, which we will later know as the Whisperers, are actually manipulating the zombies to do this, in theory, doesn't sound as interesting. However, theory and execution are two very different things. See, when you're introducing a new antagonist or a new threat to the group, it is very important that you make an impact with their introduction to establish a very viable threat that you are scared of and that are worthy antagonists for what will likely go on for another season or beyond. Jeffrey Dean Morgan's performance as Negan in the premiere episode of Season 7 was enough for people to sit through 2 terrible seasons just to see his downfall. That's what a true first impact of an antagonist can do for a show. And this impact that finally reveals the mysterious horror behind the threat we are dealing with these new, weirdly erratic zombies, comes to fruition with Jesus' death. The lead up to this is perfect. They have found Eugene and he has revealed the threat, and the Horde has backtracked back to the group and is now chasing them through a foggy cemetery The atmosphere is awesome, and for the first time in a while, actually scary as they fail to navigate their way through the cemetery, clinging to the walls, trying desperately to find a way out as the horde closes in on them. The group comes across a closed-off gate that they desperately need to try to open as the fighters of the group hold off zombies closing in on them. We switch from scene to scene of fighters like Daryl getting flashy zombie kills and dealing with the walkers like lambs to the slaughter. This is what we have seen for the past 9 seasons. A forced aura of tension when there is no tension at all. These zombies are fodder. They are meant to be killed effortlessly. And that's when Jesus takes his sword and begins his montage of flashy Aikido sword zombie kills. It's a cool, flashy scene of awesome kills. That is, until Jesus takes his sword to one walker, he swings it, and it avoids the blow. It swiftly gets behind Jesus and stabs him through the back, whispering in his ear, "You know nothing." The reason this true introduction to the Whisperers is so effective is because we are Jesus. We have grown accustomed to our characters mowing down these zombies in cool and creative ways that should get on Zombie Kill Montage, The Walking Dead Top 10 Most Badass Moments. But this time, a, quote, zombie fought back. What should have been an easy kill turned out to be his death. And this is what immediately created tension that had been unseen in The Walking Dead for years. It completely subverts our expectations, both the characters and us as viewers, and that's why it's so damn great. From the cinematography, the way it was shot, the atmosphere, it was all just awesome leading up to the twist kill of Jesus. The scene was essentially perfect outside of its choice of character. Jesus. Why him? Why now? After the death, the actor signaled that he had grown bored with what they were doing with his character, and I'm sure viewers like me were thinking the same. He was really nothing more than a cool, chill dude that knew martial arts. They had tried to do something with his character, seemingly with Maggie's absence and him having to fill the role of her leadership at Hilltop, but they actually did nothing with it and just had Tara fill it instead, seemingly coming full circle with him dying here. It's unfortunate that they really didn't expand on his character past kind of being cool, but it does subvert our expectations as a character with such potential. Getting suddenly killed really does leave an impact. And there's another complaint I have with his death. Impact. It seemingly has no impact. Seems like the only person out of our characters that actually cares that Jesus died is Aaron a little bit, just because they trained martial arts together and were friends. But besides that, Jesus is largely forgotten by the entire cast of characters. And it's really just goes to show how his character was wasted overall in the series. However, his death scene served perfectly to set up the threat of the Whisperers for this arc. It completely subverted our expectations as said prior, but now even regular zombies were a threat just because of the looming threat of the Whisperers. No longer could you just randomly mow down zombies without the threat of being shanked in the liver. And this is without even being introduced to our main antagonist, Alpha, the leader of the Whisperers, who is a mother to Lydia, who gets captured by our group after mowing down Whisperers and bringing her back after she surrenders. Alpha, at worst, is a tad bit comical with an annoying southern accent. Luckily, we mostly see her at her best, where she is extremely well acted, intimidating, creepy, and superbly confident. With her daughter Lydia's capture, Alpha now has motivation for her and the Whisperers to go after the group. With Lydia's capture, we now begin the main narrative conflict of the story: motherhood and abuse. Before the Whisperer arc of The Walking Dead, annoying, tropey teenage characters isn't exactly one complaint you hear very often about the show, but leading into the Whisperers arc, that's exactly one of my main gripes with it. Well, remember the now teenage Henry, who went to Hilltop to become a blacksmith? Well, they bring Lydia back to Hilltop too. And see, Henry has gotten into a little bit of trouble with the local Hilltop teenagers and is put in jail for 3 days for public intoxication. The teenage characters are unbearable, and the fact that the main driving plot revolves around them in the outright beginning makes it really hard to get invested. See, they brought Lydia back to Hilltop too, and now both Henry and Lydia are imprisoned next to each other, and they have time to bond. Daryl and the rest of the group are being necessarily harsh in terms of interrogating her, because obviously she not only just tried to kill them, but her group just killed Jesus and nearly killed them too. So obviously they would do that. But Henry has sympathy for her and constantly whines to Daryl about how they shouldn't do this and how she's just a girl. The show wants you to believe that Henry's doing this out of the goodness of his heart, but really we find out later that he's basically just horny and has a crush on this random skin-wearing girl. Yeah, Henry and Lydia doing horny teenager shit isn't exactly my most fun time watching The Walking Dead. However, what precedes that in the jail cells is actually a really interesting commentary on abuse. While in prison together, Henry and Lydia begin to bond, and Henry pleads with Daryl to see that she is actually just a scared girl forced into a savage group. See, Daryl, the rest of the group, and us as viewers have been essentially brainwashed into wanting this actual child to die. See, everyone in the show besides Henry and even us as viewers hate Lydia, and that's on purpose. See, she's an annoying teenage character that tried to kill our favorite characters and is part of a new threat, and she's an annoying teenager and she sucks. So therefore we want to see her die. Even some of the characters, in fact, I would say most of the characters want to see her die. A child born into this savage world. Not Henry, though. See, through their bonding, even though she lied and used that as leverage to try and attack Daryl, he still sees the good in her. The good that others can't. The good that others can't until Daryl begins interrogating Lydia about her past and her mother. See, Lydia over and over has been reciting to Daryl and Henry that not only are they screwed because Alpha, her mother, is a very formidable opponent, but that she's also a good person. That whoever the Whisperers killed probably deserved it because, well, her mom is a good person. That's the expectation that we, even the viewers and every character, as children have of our parents. They are our superheroes. They're our role models. They show us the difference between right and wrong, and we take after them. But unfortunately, not all parents are meant to be parents. We begin a flashback that shows Lydia and her mother and father at the beginning of the apocalypse holed up with a bunch of other survivors. The first recollection of this flashback shows Lydia remembering her father as an abuser and her mom as a victim. The first recollection of the flashback shows her father as a asshole abuser, her mother as an abuse victim that struggles out of the abuse and becomes stronger because of it, and the reason for her father's death in this recollection is ultimately Lydia's fault. Now, this works fine in theory. It's a typical villain who was somber and abused turns cold and becomes a badass because of it. It's sympathetic, and it at least adds some layer to their character. But what The Walking Dead does is actually much smarter and adds many, many more layers onto this story. See, the recollection that Lydia recalled to Daryl is actually not true. In fact, it is mostly not true at all. But she thinks it's true, because her mother has gaslit her into thinking not only her father's death was her fault, but that Alpha could not do any wrong. Hence why in her first recollection of her flashback, she sees her mother as an abuse victim, a justified villain. She keeps recalling to herself, she's a good person, she's a good person. And that's when all the real memories come flooding back. It wasn't her dad that was an abuser, it was her mother. All of the scenes that were in the first recollection of the flashback are switched. It was actually her father that was being verbally berated and had to console Lydia. It wasn't her fault that her father died. Alpha just decided to kill him because he wanted to stay herded up with the survivors, and she saw that as weakness. And this is again when the show brilliantly subverts our expectations. Instead of the typical sob story villain, we are now greeted with a sociopath, someone who, as a parent, physically and mentally abuses their child, gaslights them into thinking that they can do no wrong and that their father's death is their fault. And when it all comes flooding back, the realization and first attempts of denial are crushing as a viewer. This is someone who, as an audience, we probably wanted dead just a couple minutes ago. And in just a couple minutes, we realize that, oh, we were the assholes all along, and maybe Henry was right. Another addition they added to Daryl as a character who is listening to this unravel is he reveals that he is an abuse victim too. The flashback prompting because he recognizes the physical scars that are on Lydia that her mother gave her. This is a really interesting introspection into who Daryl has become and why he has become that way. Even Henry later remarks, you know, that stuff that happened earlier, it's not your fault, right? And Daryl just tells him to shut his mouth. Daryl is a lone wolf, a reclused survivor, who, out of the love for his new post-apocalyptic family, must help his friends. It reveals that these seemingly brooding, solo, lone wolf, badass characteristics of his character are actual defense mechanisms due to his past. This is when we actually grow sympathy for Lydia as an annoying teenager that we wanted dead a couple minutes ago, and even Henry, as an audience, we figure out he's right, and maybe we shouldn't be so harsh on him too. Even though their teenage hijinks are annoying to watch, this makes it bearable. This leads to Daryl actually wanting to have relationships with characters again, becoming defensive of Lydia and attached to her when Alpha comes to take her back. It also creates an interesting parallel and dynamic between Carol and Alpha. Both are mothers, but one an abuser, one an abuse victim. Alpha is essentially the antithesis to Carol's entire character. Alpha essentially represents everything that Carol hates and everything that has traumatized her into the character that she has become. When the show started, Carol had short hair. It was later explained that she kept it short because when she tried to run away from her abuser, she cut it off because he would be able to grab onto it when she ran away. Through years of peace and marriage to King Ezekiel, she has been able to grow out her hair, representing her security and healing within all that has traumatized her. While it isn't directly related to Sophia's, Lizzie, Mika's death, I also think her growing out her hair represents her healing from the loss of her children as well. It seems only natural in the story, as everything Carol hates as an abuser, that Alpha would ruin everything about Carol's 6 years of peaceful life in the time skip. See, Carol in the time skip through 6 years has healed through everything that traumatized her previously. She has been able to marry again to Ezekiel after years and years of being abused by men. She's able to raise a son after losing Sophia and her inherited daughters Lizzie and Mika. However, that all seems to be crashing down as the Whisperers seem to take a more frontal role in terms of conflict at the end of Season 9. Our first conflict is seemingly resolved after the terrible episode that is Scars. Seriously, fuck that episode, which explains why Michonne closed herself off from the rest of the communities, and why the communities emotionally and communicatively distance themselves from each other. Through the Kingdoms Trading Festival, all the leaders of each community come together to sign a pact that they are allied once again and communication and trade will flow freely. This sets up the group coming together again for the Whisperers War. While the festival is happening, Alpha attacks a Hilltop member and uses her disguise to get into the festival and confronts Lydia. This confrontation is pivotal for Lydia's character. She has finally accepted that she has been gaslit and that her mother is in fact not a good person and that she is an abuse victim. But now she comes face to face with her abuser, telling her to come with her and that everything will be fine and that she actually loves her and that her abuse is to make her strong. And as a massive stride for Lydia's character, she tells her to get out of here. She says, I am always gonna love you, a part of me will, as you're my mother, but I don't want to see you again and you're a bad person. The ways of these communities can work. Your way is not the only way. After this, Alpha infamously marks her territory by putting numerous characters' dead heads on pikes. It's a pretty impactful moment, but unfortunately, most of the characters were throwaways. When the most impactful character's death is Henry, you know there aren't really that notable names of people who just died. It's supposed to be a big shock moment, and people have even compared it to the Red Wedding from Game of Thrones, but I just don't think it's comparative. The characters that die are simply not important at all, and we don't care about them In fact, the character I was most sad about dying was Tammy Rose. Tammy Rose. She was a definitive side character that had no importance to the story. And yes, she was the character I found being most sad that died. The two biggest shock deaths are Terra and Enid, and this would have been a pretty crazy death reveal about 2 or 3 seasons ago. Unfortunately, Terra, especially in this season, was particularly annoying, and her character grew tired and bored, and poor acting from the actress who played her, although I don't really think it's her fault, I think it's just the fault of poor script, really deterred her character, and people really stopped caring about her. Enid, people universally hated her in season 6, and then after that, she was basically sidelined with nothing to do besides be a doctor, and people just didn't care about her anymore. Narratively, easily the death with the most impact is Henry. This was a kid who was good-hearted, and throughout the season had really grown on me through showing maybe I'm an asshole for wanting Lydia to die. But the main impact of this death isn't through Henry himself, it's through Carol. Carol has been with us since the beginning, and we've seen everything she's gone through the whole ordeal in season 2 with Sophia, through Lizzie and Mika, through even way back in the beginning with her husband abusing her. She has gone through a lot of ups and downs as a character, and it seems like her character had finally achieved peace. But Alpha, her antithesis, everything she hates, has just taken a child from her yet again. This completely breaks Carol as a character. Her marriage with Ezekiel falls apart. In fact, the kingdom itself falls apart and is forced to be taken in by Hilltop. Ezekiel, in of himself, sees the kingdom he built up fall, and his only son being killed, with his marriage falling apart in the process. It's a devastating blow to both characters, but mostly to Carol, as we have seen her hit low points and bounce back, and she was seemingly at her most peaceful and happy. And it is really devastating as a viewer to see her go to possibly an all-time low. It is still impactful on Ezekiel's side, though, as he seems broken as a man as well. His kingdom has fallen. He couldn't help the people that he swore to protect. And on top of that, he now has cancer. Not only has Alpha just directly killed Carol's son and multiple characters and marked their heads as her territory, but we're also made aware that she has access to a massive horde that, through the Whisperers using their skins and pretending to be walkers, can manipulate the horde into basically attacking whatever they want. Essentially, we see the group being held at hostage. They have no leverage, and even though they have just been dealt this massive blow, they have to grit their teeth and not do anything. This period of the arc is what I like to refer to as the Whisperers' Cold War and not the Whisperers' War, as they are constantly tampered with having to go out into Alpha's territory, but being forced not to because they are scared of the repercussions, despite her killing these characters. And unfortunately, this is where a big problem with the arc comes up, and many recent Walking Dead arcs in particular, and that is filler. We start season 10 off with them training and being very cautious of Alpha, but her not being around. It's actually made aware that Alpha and her horde and the Whisperers are gone away somewhere, and they will return soon. Within this period, we see certain plot lines unveil within Alpha's own group. We see the repercussions of that one Whisperer leaving the baby in that confrontation in season 9. We see how it affects her sister, who is the aunt of that baby, having to be forced to kill the mother when she goes crazy over the loss of her baby. And she constantly tries to reaffirm herself that she is a good person because the Whisperer's way is right. It's only natural. This is an interesting way to expand upon the Whisperer's philosophies, and we see it expand Gamma's character when she interacts with Aaron at the border and he talks about his adopted daughter. While these are interesting conflicts to explore within Alpha's group, it unfortunately takes up too much time within the arc. Season 10 unnecessarily feels very filler heavy, whether it's Eugene talking to that lady on the radio and gathering a group of Ezekiel and Yumiko to go out and find them and finding that princess lady to set up season 11, or through the constant shenanigans within Alpha's own group like So, Unfortunately, a lot of Season 10 is taken up by filler, and yes, the Whisperers arc takes up all of Season 10, all 16 45-minute episodes. Speaking about filler, let's talk about some of the good kind, like Siddiq. He takes up a big chunk of Season 10, mostly dealing with being the only survivor of the Headpike incident. An interesting addressing of survivor's guilt in the show, given that we see it eat Siddiq up from the inside. While this conflict within Siddiq honestly takes up too much time within Season 10, it is a nice expansion of his character. I even thought that the relationship he was forming with his co-doctor, Dante, was really nice, and I thought it expanded Dante's character quite nicely, showing that he was a former veteran and he also addressed the whole survivor's guilt thing. But the entire dynamic between Dante and Siddiq takes a dark turn when we find out that the Whisperers are using transgressions to break the group, such as putting the dead guts of walkers in the water supply, and Dante is a Whisperer who on the inside is working as their spy within the group. Not only relaying messages of what the group is up to, which is how they know they crossed the border a couple of times more than they told them they did, but also being in charge of the water supply, allowing the Whisperers to poison the group's water supply and sicken many of the group members. The fact Siddiq's revelation of this resulted in his death feels kind of cheap. Feels like that classic criticism of The Walking Dead just killing off characters to kill them. It didn't feel like Siddiq's time, especially because of his importance, because Carl died saving him, a character so integral to the show. Siddiq damn well better be giving us our money's worth for Carl's death, and unfortunately he kind of doesn't. Siddiq had so much more to give. I think it'd be way more interesting if they let him expand past his survivor's guilt that was clearly eating him up inside and rebuild off of that, especially since he had become a father at that point of the show. These microtransgressions and internal assaults from the Whisperers ultimately end this Cold War, and they say, fuck territories, we're just going to try and kill each other. And this is when the Whisperers War begins. A big player in the Whisperer War is Negan, a character I haven't touched up on. And that's because his character up to this point was in a weird limbo. He was the main antagonist of the past 2 seasons. He was a terrible guy, but charismatic. Both a character that you hated but loved, and someone we wanted to see go down. And Rick finally brought him down, so what next? Well, he gets out in this season, multiple times. And he sees that there is nothing out there for him anymore, which makes him actually attached to the group which he has now reluctantly become a part of. Through 6 years behind bars, he has grown attachments to the community, namely Judith and Lydia, who he relates to as an outsider. Both of them understanding that perhaps they're just misunderstood, people that have been a part of groups that have terrorized the other community that they're now a part of. This comes to a head when 3 Alexandrians try to kill Lydia, claiming that she's a Whisperer and that she is evil. This leads to Negan saving her, but in a result accidentally killing one of the attackers. Even though Negan was doing the right thing and defending an innocent girl, this causes a vote. Should Negan be killed? And the rift is actually surprisingly very, very split. Sure, he might have been doing the right thing, but he killed someone in the process. Maybe he should have just been put down very long ago. But before they reach a decisive vote on whether to execute Negan, he escapes. Not from Lydia, not from Judith, but from Carol, cutting deals with someone who brutally murdered Glenn and Abraham and brutally murdered so many others in the group because she wants revenge. In fact, Carol's mental health is not doing so well right now at this point in the show. We see her not sleeping for days at a time, addicted to pills and constantly hallucinating. But worst of all, she is willing to do anything to get her revenge on Alpha, as we see here, associating with Negan, who before she would not even think twice about talking to. Now she's cutting deals with the same person who smashed a bat over Glenn's skull. This leads to her getting the group in unnecessary trouble multiple times, nearly shooting Alpha when they were still doing the whole territory thing and causing an all-out war, which they weren't fully committed to then. Going on suicide missions multiple times, where the group would inevitably have to come save her and it would put them all in danger. In the episode Squeeze, this ends up getting Magna and Connie seemingly killed. adding to the worsening mental health and guilty conscience of Carol. So yeah, Negan goes to become a Whisperer, even though as a viewer we are unbeknownst to his intentions. And Negan's role as a Whisperer just goes to show what an awesomely charismatic character he is. He eventually works his way up to Alpha, becoming quite interested in him. And I don't mean interested just as a pivotal group member, but I mean romantically. Yeah, Beta's out here doing everything for Alpha. Meanwhile, Negan rolls in and immediately lays down the pipe. This man, Beta, is simped and cucked. So we see Negan supposedly using this insider role as a Whisperer to kill Alpha as a form of leverage to safely get him back in the good graces of the community. While this is obviously how it plays out, it's also implied that maybe he has just grown a soft spot for the community as a whole and wants to do his part to stop the destruction of the community. It's an interesting turn for Negan's character, which shows that he's definitely changing. Although it still feels weird with Negan interacting with all these characters that were hell-bent on killing him at any cost just a season or two ago. So the war has begun. So how was the action? After the stinker that was all-out war and the numerous drawn-out action scenes that grew tiresome, this was actually a refreshing change of pace. Daryl versus Beta is probably my favorite fight in The Walking Dead of all time, and his fight with Alpha was also pretty badass. For the first time in a long time, people like Daryl and Carol were put in situations where they weren't indestructible one-man armies. They were actually getting hurt and they were at risk of being killed. I mean, watching Daryl struggle against both Beta and Alpha was a very refreshing change of pace. I don't think we've seen Daryl struggle in a fight for multiple seasons now. And Carol being put numerous times in scenarios where she is forced to be saved by the rest of the group is also a refreshing change of pace. Remember, it was a plot line just 2 seasons ago that Carol was such a force of nature that she would have panic attacks because she knew she was about to slaughter everyone in the room, even when she is held hostage, unarmed, with a bunch of armed men around. Her plot armor was so powerful that it literally became a plot point that she would have panic attacks by knowing that she would naturally just slaughter everyone in her vicinity. So actually seeing her in danger was, yes, a refreshing change of pace. Jesus' death and the Pikes incident really set up that the Whisperers are out for blood if they want to, and the impending doom of the Horde and the Whisperers coming upon the group really made it epic when they were supposedly going to make their final stand at Hilltop. The build-up to the fight at Hilltop is epic. It really got me hyped for what was going on. I mean, to further elaborate on how Daryl was no longer just an emotionless shell of a character, Daryl admits that he's scared of the threat that's coming upon them. They are vastly outnumbered, and it's very likely that Hilltop will fall. They have women and children, and the entire group is having people that they want to protect, and it seems that their inevitable doom is coming upon them. Following this scene up with Daryl and Ezekiel making a pact that if either of them die, that they will abandon the fight and go get the children out of there, really upped the tension. It made it feel like that they were taking their last stand against the Whisperers at Hilltop, and that this was essentially The Walking Dead's Battle of Helm's Deep. It really got me hyped for the conflict, but unfortunately, it didn't really deliver on a impact level. By the time the Horde and the Whisperers show up at Hilltop, the actual action is awesome. We see them line up with the training they were doing at the beginning of Season 10 with the shields and the formations and the arrows and all that good shit. We see an epic battle ensue, and we see Hilltop get set on fire and Hilltop's walls come crashing down as the group desperately fights against the Horde and Whisperers sprinkled within. It's a really awesome and epic battle scene that unfortunately gets cut a little too short. Nobody important has died or gotten injured, and suddenly we're cutting to the next morning, and supposedly everyone important has off-screen escaped and just ran away. This battle really showcased some of my problems with the action in this arc. The plot armor. It's ridiculous that nothing happens to our main cast in a show that's notorious for killing people. But it seems like in this arc, the only people they're really interested in killing are meaningless characters or fodder characters. Basically, characters that the show has been doing nothing with, such as Jesus, Enid, or Terra, or characters we literally don't know the name of and have never seen in our lives, extras. The characters that do die don't have a big impact on either the characters or us as viewers, so why should we care? We don't care that they died. we care that it's building up the Whisperers as awesome antagonists, which they are. It's just unfortunate that it seems like every important character that we would care is killed off is surrounded by plot armor. A couple examples. Negan goes into Whisperer territory in order to try and get closer to Alpha and become her subordinate. He is confronted by Beta and a bunch of Whisperers. He then confronts them and says, "Bring it on." Why did Beta take him alive? That makes zero sense besides the fact that Negan needs to stay alive for the plot. This is someone who has killed his subordinates for basically looking at him wrong or saying the wrong thing and would kill anyone on sight. But because it's Negan, he takes him alive. In the episode Squeeze, the cast is after Alpha and she leads them to a cave where she is storing their hoard. Why did she lead them into the cave? They even send Whisperers after them in the cave to kill them after she leads them into the cave. It makes zero sense. Why not just lead her to the big-ass group of Whisperers and kill them on the spot? Daryl, Carol, Jerry, Magna, Connie, they should all be dead. And of course, at the Battle of Hilltop, as soon as everything's going bad, everyone just off-screen escapes and it cuts to the next morning where every important character has escaped and all of the fodder have died. It's really unfortunate to see the series hit all-time highs in terms of action, but then not be able to capture the same stakes that some of the earlier seasons held. And then we have a complete subvertation of that on the opposite side of the spectrum with the Whisperers, with Alpha's death. Everything I said wrong about what's happening with our protagonists, how none of the main cast will die, that does not apply at all to Alpha, who prematurely exits the arc when Negan assassinates her by slitting her throat. Okay, this came out of nowhere, and this is a good thing and a bad thing. For one, it's a bad thing because it set up the lackluster, in fact, I'll not say lackluster, it set up the terrible finale for the Whisperers arc that would come after this, but it's good because it completely subverted our expectations. I love when shows can do that, and The Walking Dead is at its best when it subverts our expectations. When Negan killed Abraham, and comic readers said, "Whew, Glenn is safe," but then he followed it up by killing Glenn. That was a subvertation of our expectations, and it made Glenn's death that much more impactful. When Jesus suddenly died when the Whisperer within the Horde suddenly fought back and stabbed him, that was a subvertation of our expectations, and it's what made his death so impactful. When Alpha, in the middle of this conflict, gets killed by Negan, it subverts our expectations drastically. She is the main antagonist who has just been prematurely taken out of the game. It came out of nowhere, and the fact that Carol orchestrated it was just perfect, getting her revenge through Negan. However, was taking out the main antagonist before the final confrontation with the Whisperers a good idea? I don't think so. Even though there was an element of shock value that this moment provided, it made the finale much, much less impactful and made it just feel like loose ends that needed to be wrapped up. Beta is a really, really badass villain. He is basically the Kaido of The Walking Dead. If it's one-on-one, bet on Beta. But unfortunately, his character was much less interesting than Alpha. He was basically just a big-ass dude that was a Whisperer. And unfortunately, that's the extent of his character, besides the fact he was pretty demented and crazy. It feels like a lot less is at stake when Beta is the main antagonist of your finale, especially when the main conflict between Lydia, Carol, and all the other characters revolves around what Alpha did, not what Beta did. This would have been fine if Beta rose to the occasion and properly filled in the gap that Alpha's death left. Unfortunately, he didn't do that. His character really didn't develop past the fact that he was a big-ass Whisperer, and having that dude as your finale villain was pretty disappointing, especially since Alpha was the built-up and actually fleshed-out complex villain established throughout the entire arc. The one good thing besides shock value of Alpha's death is the fact that Carol orchestrated it. After doing everything she can to get revenge on Alpha, putting the group in danger numerous times without a care in the world, she finally got her revenge. And after it's done and Negan shows her chopped off head, nothing changes. She is still the same damaged person, and she knew this is how it was going to be. She still has hallucinations. She still struggles with the death of her son, the fall of her kingdom, the fall of her marriage with Ezekiel. She said she wanted to kill Alpha. Why? Because it'll make her feel a little better. That's it. It wouldn't fix her problems, and it doesn't. The real beginnings of her healing as a character again comes through the group around her, even though her numerous times putting the group in danger has alienated the group from her even further. But there are people around her that are still willing to help her heal, even though she has hurt so many people around them. Lydia specifically I thought was really touching. In the finale, she saves Carol from killing herself. She also notes how Carol has been avoiding her because she killed her mother. She says that it's fine and that, I'm not looking for a new mother. By talking to you, it can be something different. Relieving the paranoia, stress, and guilt Carol feels about developing a parent-type relationship with a child character, given all of the losses that she has been through. One character's reconciliation with Carol is honestly one of the best scenes in the entire series, and that comes through Kelly's conversation with Carol. Out of that new group that we get introduced to in the beginning of the time skip, Connie and Kelly are easily the most interesting and likable of that group. Not only that, but they have the most going on as characters. Connie, the older sister, is fully deaf. Not only does this provide a very interesting dynamic in the apocalypse, with several nail-biting scenes including Connie navigating the terrain, lost or confused with walkers and whisperers around, deaf. That scene in the cornfield outside of Hilltop in Season 9 was really intense. It was the first time in a while The Walking Dead was actually scary. And then there's Kelly, her younger sister, who is also beginning to lose her hearing. This is brought up in the beginning of Season 10, and Kelly is struggling to deal with it. Connie reinforces her younger sister, though, telling her that her disability isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. While at the time this scene came off as very overly preachy and just a little bit too hammy, the fact that they used it later in a really, really good way really redeemed this scene for me. Carol's careless acts of revenge, for all Kelly knows, might as well have killed Connie, her older sister. Although unbeknownst to the group, she is still wandering out there, her status is completely unknown. Magna has come back from the tunnels, but Connie has not, and as far as her younger sister knows, she is dead. And this is all Carol's fault. She went on a suicide mission in the tunnels to try and destroy the Horde, which made the group come and save her, which ultimately led in Connie getting trapped inside the tunnels. When Carol and Kelly finally end up talking, though, there is no resentment from Kelly. Kelly, filling in the role as Connie did to her, reinforces Carol. She brings back up that Connie said that her disability isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. And she relates that to Carol's role as the lone wolf, where everything around her gets hurt. She recognizes that Carol did what she had to do to get revenge on the person that killed her son, and doesn't hold any gripes with her for Connie getting possibly killed in the process. She shows that even though she's losing her vision, she has taught the whole group sign language as a result of her and her sister being deaf, which has tactically been used by the group to an advantage. Blessings in disguise. This is what Carol is. She has saved the group numerous times. Terminus, the saviors. Multiple times Carol has had to come to their rescue because she is a force of nature who, when left alone, will get shit done, even if bad things happen in the process. This was the best moment in the show, not only for Kelly's character, but for Carol's as well, and I thought it was just a really awesome scene. With Alpha's death addressed, let's move on to the finale. Okay, so let me get this out of the way. The finale is terrible. The main conflict of the finale involves Beta taking control of Alpha's horde and going to get revenge for Alpha by taking out the group. This makes the whole finale just feel like tying up loose ends, even though it should be the giant climactic conclusion. Even though the giant horde is a massive threat, it doesn't feel like one. We as viewers viewed Alpha as the main threat. She was the one that was fleshed out, she was the one that was developed, and she was the one that we grew to fear, not these walkers. These walkers only have power under a powerful leader such as Alpha, and Beta does not fill that role. This could have been handled in a pretty dramatic way if the show didn't do such a bad job at it. They storm Alexandria only to see that it has been abandoned. Okay, so here's the plan. The group has tricked the Whisperers into thinking that they have run off to Oceanside, which makes them leading into a trap. Cool, right? Well, first of all, they don't even explain why leading Beta and the Whisperers to Oceanside is a good thing. It's just leading them to the ocean. We already know that they can turn the Horde around. This makes no sense. The main logical conclusion I can think of is that they are just trying to buy time and not be completely wiped out by the Horde, but they act as if bringing them to Oceanside is some climactic play that's going to defeat the Whisperers. I'm not sure why they think this. Eventually, Beta finds out that the group is holed up in a abandoned hospital, all of them holed up trying to wait out the Whisperers. This leads to a giant horde with the Whisperers leading them, surrounding the hospital, and they begin to close in on the group. Okay, so here's the plan. Luke has set up a stereo that they're going to put on a wagon and blast music so they can lead the giant horde away. Sounds good, right? Well, now all they have to do is cover themselves in zombie meat, walk out into the horde, and meet up at the wagon rendezvous. Only issue with that is, how did they not see the wagon rendezvous when the Whisperers were closing in on the hospital? That horde literally surrounded basically every square inch surrounding the hospital, yet the rendezvous was right outside of where the horde was. How were the Whisperers able to close in on Aaron and Alden, but not this giant wagon with a dude waiting for a stereo to get delivered? Not only this, but this showcases where the finale lacks. It lacks stakes. The only person who dies is a random person from Oceanside who I didn't even know the name of. Besides that, they are able to effortlessly get through the Walker crowd. In fact, the way that random Oceanside girl died doesn't even make sense. Carol is the one in front of her, and the Whisperer sees the both of them, but instead of attacking Carol, she just decides to skip her and attack the Oceanside girl because, plot armor. Regardless, their stereo plan fails, the Whisperers destroy it, and the horde begins again to close in on the abandoned hospital where the group is holed up in. This is when Daryl comes up with the genius idea of going back into the crowd, and in this crowd of thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of zombies, tracking down every Whisperer in the crowd and killing them all. This was probably the dumbest shit I've ever seen because it actually worked. They go into this crowd of tens of thousands of zombies with Whisperers disguised as zombies. And as Beta is looking around, he just hears these Whisperers effortlessly getting taken out throughout the crowd. All of that tension of them originally going throughout the crowd, barely getting by these zombies with their flesh disguises, and having to watch out for Whisperers trying to shank them, that is gone. They just go into the crowd and Beta starts hearing the screams of his subordinates. It's dumb and it literally makes zero sense. Literally, we get an overshot head of the horde and there's no way they could have tracked down all of the walkers inside the horde, killed them. And then we get to Beta's death. And this is why Beta, his horde, and the Whisperers at this point feel like a loose end. They just decide, let's just go kill all of them, and they do that. Wow, what a climactic conclusion to this Whisperers arc. Beta's death in the end was kinda cool. Negan comes back after faking out that he was going to escape from the horde when the Whisperers start closing in on Gabriel up in the abandoned building. He ends up coming back and taking Beta by surprise. Beta then goes at Negan, which distracts him, and Daryl is able to stab him in the face. And it's a pretty cool visual of his eyes being stabbed out. He grabs the knives that are plunged in his eyes, takes them out, and it accepts his fate happily as being eaten by walkers. It's a pretty badass death, even if at this point he had become a disappointment of a antagonist. But then we get the Horde. Well, if we're just going to deal with the Whisperers like they have absolutely no stakes and they are not a threat, why don't we deal with probably the biggest Horde we've seen in the series thus far in the same manner? Lydia says that she has been taught by her mother how to control the Horde. She doesn't elaborate, we just cut to her leading this horde of tens of thousands of walkers away. I'm sorry, but how are you, as one lone disguised walker, going to lead tens of thousands of walkers away? This makes zero sense. They are spread out practically miles apart. How is one walker leading the other away going to lead to this giant horde of tens of thousands away? And what is this secret that your mother taught you and how to lead the horde away? If this is some secret, then why is it as simple as you disguising as a walker and walking in a certain direction that you want them to go in? This isn't a secret. This is just tricking dumb walkers. I still don't understand how this works, and it's stupid, and it doesn't make sense. Then we get to the Maggie Deus Ex Machina. See, there was some form of tension in the abandoned building, even though there was none outside. That's kind of ironic, given that the main force was outside and only a few were inside. Anyway, Gabriel has everyone evacuate, and since they are going down the elevator shaft on a rope, Gabriel stays behind with a shotgun to prevent them from cutting the rope. This was pretty heroic stuff from Gabriel, and I actually thought he was going to die. And that's essentially what is going to happen until they pin down Gabriel. They're about to kill him, and then Maggie shows up. Wow, she's been gone the entire conflict, the entire season, and at the very moment Gabriel needed her most, she suddenly appeared with some hooded dude with scythes, and they kill the Whisperers. Wow. I'm sorry, but this moment is just so fucking dumb. Maggie just comes up out of nowhere and saves Gabriel. It just doesn't make sense. So how do they deal with the giant horde that Lydia was taught how to lead away? Well, they lead them to a cliff where they just all fall off the cliff and die. Okay. I guess all of the threat of zombies are now officially eliminated since we can do this now. Let's just lead them to this cliff and have them all fall off. So, unfortunately, the arc that reinvigorated the fear and threat of the zombies in the series officially just killed it in the finale. Although I will admit, we do get a pretty touching moment with Lydia stopping Carol from leading the zombies off the cliff and instead staying with her and stopping her, and they all watch the zombies fall down. It is pretty climactic, but it just doesn't make sense, although the moment is pretty touching. So yeah, the finale sucked. Alpha died too prematurely, and at that point the finale was just wrapping up loose ends with Beta, her horde, and the rest of the Whisperers. Unfortunately, that's how the finale played out, and it wouldn't have been so bad if they did the finale competently, but unfortunately it was just nonsensical shit and Deus Ex Machina Maggie. So yeah, terrible finale. Honestly, it just pissed me off that a pretty good arc got a shitty conclusion. So, in conclusion, did the Whisperers arc of The Walking Dead reinvigorate the show and save it? Yes and no. It absolutely did save the show. If the show kept going in the direction it was going in seasons 7 and 8, it would have officially died from any and all relevance. Rick leaving the show actually reinvigorated the cast, the environment through the time skip. And his absence really let a lot of the other characters shine, even though Michonne left this season and this arc, which is unfortunate. But besides that, these characters were at their best that they've ever been with Rick's absence, and it seems Rick's departure was actually a blessing in disguise. With the disappointment that was Negan, Alpha was a breath of fresh air, being probably the most intimidating villain in The Walking Dead since the Governor. In fact, I would argue that she is the best Walking Dead villain, even better than the Governor. With the new showrunner at the helm, the action, the pace, and the characters were just the best they've been in a long time, and it certainly reinvigorated the show in that respect. However, it still suffers from drastic issues that the earlier seasons do not suffer from. Plot armor and plot convenience is still a prevalent annoyance, which seemed to have become a mainstream stay in the series since seasons 7 and 8. Not only that, while the writing was the best it's been in quite a long time, the finale just showed that the writers are not doing their job all the way correct yet. The writing for this arc was actually awesome for the most part, besides the fact that they fully fucked it up in the finale. While I don't think it made enough noise to make any fans who dropped The Walking Dead come back, me personally, I dropped the series back in Season 5, and upon my watching the show this year, this was a pleasant surprise. The show had tanked in Seasons 7 and 8, but they seem to have successfully made a comeback, making a story that I could get invested in, and the best damn story they've made in years. This gave me faith that The Walking Dead could actually be great television again, after Seasons 7 and 8 completely squandered that vision. If you guys enjoyed the video, give it a like, subscribe, comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this arc. I know this was kind of a long video. I didn't know exactly how long it was going to be when I made it. I kind of just made it on the fly because I just finished this arc. So no spoilers below for Season 11, please. And on top of that, I'd like to know your guys' thoughts on the arc, my thoughts on it. And yeah, have a great day, guys.